Something rises from the dark water. Slow, deliberate, a dark, slick arc, enormous, almost impossibly smooth, curls out of the river like a floating mountain emerging from sleep. For half a second, the water stills. Then it's gone, swallowed back into the black. This is not the ocean. There are no salt swells here, no crashing waves, no open blue horizon. This is the Amazon basin, a liquid labyrinth of tannin-stained water so dense with suspended sediment and decaying leaf matter that it runs the color of old tea. The water here absorbs light rather than reflects it. What lives inside it moves through absolute darkness. And yet something enormous calls this place home. What you just saw was not a fish, it was not a reptile, it breathes air, it nurses its young, it has a brain so architecturally complex that scientists have spent decades trying to fully understand how it works, and it has been living in freshwater rivers, hidden from most of the world, for millions of years. They are not creatures adapted to rivers, they are creatures the ocean forgot. Ancient relic giants marooned in the arteries of continents. These are the freshwater river dolphins and their kin, the last surviving megafauna of river ecosystems that once stretched across ancient floodplains when the world looked nothing like it does today. They are sometimes called freshwater whale relics, and for good reason, because their story doesn't begin in river, it begins in the sea millions of years ago, and it ends somewhere far more terrifying than any ocean trench. Stay with this, because what you are about to understand about these animals will change the way you see every river you ever encounter again. When the sea came to the continent, to understand what these creatures are, you have to rewind the clock by tens of millions of years. Back to a time when South America was barely recognizable. Around 15 million years ago, the Amazon basin was not a river at all. It was an inland sea, a shallow, warm, saltwater body stretching from the Andes foothills deep into the heart of the continent. And the ancestors of what would become river dolphins, early cetaceans from ocean lineages, swam freely through it. Then the Andes rose slowly over geologic time. The mountains crept upward, blocking the western connection to the Pacific. The inland sea began to drain eastward. It became a vast swamp, then mega wetland, then over millions of years, the river system we know today. And the cetaceans, those ancient ocean swimmers, were trapped inside it. What happened next is one of the most dramatic evolutionary stories on Earth. Stranded in freshwater, cut off from the deep ocean, these animals either died or changed. They changed radically over millions of years of isolation. Their bodies began to reshape themselves around the demands of river life. Their echolocation, already sophisticated, became even more finely tuned for navigating labyrinthine waterways and sensing prey through dense, cloudy water. Their necks became partially unfused, unusual for cetaceans, allowing them to turn their heads independently, something ocean dolphins can barely do. Their rostrums, the long beaks you see in species like the boto, grew elongated and flexible, perfect for probing between submerged roots and riverbed crevices for hidden fish and crustaceans. The boto's rostrum can angle 30 degrees off center, hunting through root tangles that would baffle any straight-billed predator. These were not ocean's animals that wandered into rivers. They became something entirely new, a lineage of intelligence engineered by isolation, sculpted by a word that no longer exists. And they survived silently for millions of years, right beneath the surface of some of the world's most biologically complex river systems, largely unknown to most of the humanity until the modern era. But there are more. The Amazon boto, the pink river dolphin, is only the most famous. Across the world's great river basins, parallel evolutionary stories played out. The Ganges River dolphin in South Asia, the Irrawaddy dolphin bridging coasts and river in Southeast Asia, the Yangtze River dolphin or Baiji now almost certainly gone forever, each one a separate chapter in the same ancient story. Each one a relic of a word that the ocean left behind on the land. The mind inside the black water. There is moment documented by field researchers working in Mamirua Reserve in Brazil that deserves to be described carefully. A boto is hunting alone in shallow, flooded forest. The water is maybe a meter deep, scattered with emergent tree trunks, submerged shrubs, and tangled root system. These are fish here, small cichlids and carassins, but they are hiding. Pressed flat into substrate, silent, the boto does not rush. It circles slowly, its body language is almost casual, as though it's simply passing through. Then, with surgical precision, it angles its elongated beak between two roots and delivers a single high-intensity burst of echolocation, not broadcast widely into the water, but focused, a narrow beam directed into a specific gap between debris. The fish flushes, the boto's head rotates, that unusual, partially unfused neck doing its job, and takes the prey before it can escape into open water. This is not instinct operating on autopilot, this is problem solving, real time, spatially aware, ecologically informed decision making, and it is happening in an animal whose brain to body ratio, a rough proxy for cognitive complexity, falls into the ranges that surprises researchers who study it. Botos have been observed using sponges as tools. They engage in prolonged ritualistic social behaviors during mating season. Males carrying floating vegetation or sticks, parading them in ways researchers believe function as social displays, analogous in some structural sense to the bower building of birds. They form loose social alliances. Mothers invest years in their calves, and they communicate not with simple click trains alone, but with layered, complex vocalizations whose fully communicative function we still do not completely understand. A boto's echolocation beam can resolve objects smaller than a centimeter at distances and in water conditions that would render any human sonar instrument nearly useless. The Irrawaddy dolphin, stocky, round-headed, distributed across the coastal and riverine waters of Southeast Asia, takes this intelligence somewhere even more unexpected. In certain parts of Myanmar and Laos, Irrawaddy dolphins engage in cooperative fishing with humans, not trained, not domesticated, voluntarily. Fishermen beat the water with oars in a specific rhythm, and the dolphins respond by herding fish towards the nets, apparently benefiting themselves from the panicked, net compressed schools. This behavior has been passed down through generations on both sides, human communities and dolphin populations, a cultural transmission of cooperative behavior that has no real parallel elsewhere in the animal kingdom at this scale. Think about that. A wild animal choosing cooperation across generations through learned cultural behavior in a freshwater river ecosystem, while the rest of the world barely knows it exists. An ecosystem built on a ghost. What most people do not realize is that river dolphins are not simply residents of river ecosystems, they are architects of them. They are, in the language of ecology, keystone species, organisms whose presence maintains the structural integrity of the entire biological community around them. The bottom's diet spans over 50 documented species of fish across the Amazon system. It hunts a year around across multiple depth zones, across flooded forest and open river channel alike. This predation keeps fish population distributed, preventing any single species from dominating a particular habitat and outcompeting others. It drives prey fish to behave differently, to occupy different niches, to school in patterns that alter sediment disturbance, nutrient cycling, and downstream food web dynamics. But the ecological function of river dolphins goes beyond predation. Their bodies are mobile nutrient transfer systems, feeding deep in flooded forests, then surfacing and defecating in open river channels. They move phosphorus, nitrogen, and carbon across spatial scales that would otherwise remain locked in forest substrate. Their mere movement through the river, the hydrodynamic pressure of a large mammal at depth, stirs bottom sediments and influences oxygen distribution in the water column. Remove the bottom from the Amazon, the river does not simply lose a charismatic mammal, it loses a process, a set of ecological relationships that downstream life, including certain fish species commercially important to Amazonian human communities, depends on. The river becomes quieter, flatter, less complex, and less resilient. When a key stone is pulled from an arc, the whole structure holds until one day it doesn't. River dolphins are the keystones of the freshwater world. The Ganges River dolphin, known locally as the susu, named for the sound it makes when surfacing, is an almost entirely blind animal. Its eyes retain light sensitivity but lack the lens structure for image formation. In the turbid, suspended sediment waters of the Ganges and Brahmaputra, vision is useless anyway. Instead, the Susu navigates, hunts, and communicates using one of the most refined echolocation system of any cetacean. It emits sounds constantly, not in burst sequence like many dolphins, but in almost unbroken stream. A continuous acoustic scan of the world around it. It sees through sound in a river that human senses would render entirely impenetrable. And this animal, this extraordinary, ancient, functionally blind, sonic architecture is listed as endangered. Its population, once in the tens of thousands, has collapsed. River engineering, fishing, net entanglement, industrial chemical contamination, and sand mining have shredded its habitat. The Ganges today is so altered from its natural state that the Susu exist in pockets, isolated populations between barrages and dams, unable to move, unable to find mates, quietly running towards genetic collapse. What we are already losing. In December 2006, a team of international scientists completed a 6-week, 3,400-kilometer survey of Yangtze River in China. They were looking for the Baiji and Yangtze River dolphin, a pale, nearly blind animal functionally adapted to the Yangtze's specific conditions over millions of years. Ancient, irrepressible. They found nothing, not one individual. The survey was exhaustive. The silence was total. The Baiji is almost certainly extinct, the first large aquatic mammal to be driven to extinction in the modern era by human activity, not hunted to death through identical net deaths contributed, destroyed primarily by habitat destruction by the Three Gorges Dam, by decades of unregulated industrial pollution, by the sheer weight of one of the most densely populated river corridors on Earth, bearing down on a single fragile species until there was simply no functional habitat left. It took millions of years of evolutionary refinement to produce the Baiji. It took approximately 50 years of industrial development to erase it. We did not hunt the Baiji to extinction, we simply built the world we wanted. And it turned out there was no room for a river dolphin in it. The water today is listed as endangered. In the last 3 decades, its population is estimated to have declined by over 50% in some areas. Deliberate killing for use as bait in catfish trade, an illegal but widespread practice, has accelerated the decline. Climate change is altering Amazonian flood cycles in ways that disconnect the dolphins from the flooded forest where they hunt. Hydroelectric dam construction is fragmenting river connectivity, isolating populations just as it did for the Baiji. The Irrawaddy dolphins of the Mekong number fewer than 90 individuals in the freshwater stretch of the river between Cambodia and Laos. 90 in an ecosystem that spans thousands of kilometers. Gill net entanglement is the primary cause of mortality, slow deaths underwater in silence. The cooperative fishing tradition that humans and Irrawaddy dolphins developed together, a cultural inheritance centuries old, is dissolving because there are no longer enough dolphins left to maintain the behavior. When a cultural behavior disappears, it doesn't simply end. It leaves a shape behind, a space where something used to exist. Fishermen in Myanmar describe changes in the river since the dolphin populations fell, not just symbolically, practically. The fish schools behave differently. The net yields are different. Something structural in the ecology has shifted. The ghost of the cooperative hunting pattern is visible in the changed behavior of prey species that are no longer herded the same way. The river remembers. Now, closing the final thoughts, there is something deeply unsettling about the way these animals die. Not violently, not dramatically, not the way we imagine extinction. They thin out gradually, populations fragment, individual animals travel further between encounters with their own kind. Calves are born less frequently. Communication patterns between isolated groups diverge and drift, acoustic cultures separating as the distances between them grow. And then one session, a survey team moves through water that should contain life and finds only the river, moving, silent, unchanged on the surface, hollow underneath. The river will not stop flowing when the last boat surfaces for the last time. The Ganges will not mourn the Susu. The Mekong will continue south to the sea regardless of whether any Irrawaddy dolphin is left to arc through its current. Nature does not grieve its losses in any way we can see. But those losses are real and they are structural. Every river dolphin that disappears takes with it not just a species but a process, a set of ecological relationships shaped by millions of years of co-evolution. Relationships between predator and prey, between mammal and microbe, between ancient body and ancient waterway that cannot simply be restored once they are served. The river that remains after the dolphins are gone is not same river, it wears the same name. It carries the same water, but something fundamental has been removed from its interior logic, and ecosystems like arches tolerate the removal of keystones for a while. We are not watching the end of species, we are watching the dismantling of a word that existed before we had a word for the concept of word. The Boto was navigating flooded Amazonian forest before our species left Africa. The Susu was emitting its unbroken acoustic scan of the Ganges before any human civilization rose along its banks. The Baiji survived, the dinosaurs survived, the ice ages survived everything the natural world threw at it, and was undone in 50 years by the thing the natural world had never encountered before. The dark backs still rise from the black water, for now in the tannin dark rivers, in the clouded Ganges floodplain, in the shrinking stretches of the Mekong, the giants are still there, still moving, still thinking, still listening to a world that is growing quieter around them. The question is not whether we can save them. The biology is clear. The population are small but not gone. The habitats are degraded but not destroyed. The question is whether we decide they are worth saving, whether we decide that millions of years of evolution producing intelligence in a freshwater river is something worth preserving, or whether we continue building the world we want and simply make room for one less kind of mind in it. If you want to keep understanding the hidden logic of the natural world at this depth, subscribe to WildLabX. New films drop every week. The next one will leave a mark.